So Sarah, do you want to get started or do you want to wait a few more minutes?
We can probably go ahead and get started.
Okay.
It's okay if a few people trickle in.
Okay. All right, so Ted, if you don't mind pulling up the PowerPoint. And then if you can go to the next slide, perfect. So I'm going to hand it off pretty quickly here, but thanks everyone for joining us. Unfortunately, we're still in a virtual setting, but you know, we're excited to be here and to be able to share a little bit more about progress on the Middle Cheshire corridor study. So Sam is going to quickly talk to you about project status and a quick recap of some of our more recent engagement. Then she's going to hand it off to Dave Schwartz from our team to talk a little bit about the traffic analysis that was conducted. A few of the comments from the last meeting were very targeted about, you know, intersection improvements and the possibility for new signals and asking, you know, good questions regarding opportunities around those topics. So he's going to talk about the findings from the traffic counts that GTC was able to assist us in gathering for those areas. And then we're going to hand it over to Ted Liddell from our team, and he is going to walk through, as well as Lindsay Zepting from Alta, some of the treatment recommendations based on our findings, as well as what we heard from community members, and then placemaking recommendations. And then I will just wrap it up with a quick discussion of next steps. So handing off to Sam to talk about project status.
Great, thanks, Kimberly. So we have really identified 5 key milestones to guide us through this planning process. And really at this point, we are in the recommendations and alternatives stage. At the last meeting, we had presented some of our preliminary recommendations related to pedestrian and bicycle accommodations, intersection improvements, etc. And since that meeting, we have gone out to the public, received some feedback, and you know, based on those results, we're able to today present some of those recommendations to you, as well as move on to the cost estimating and draft development phase for the report. So we did hold our first public workshop in August, and this was actually one of the first socially distanced workshops that we have conducted during the COVID pandemic. And what we had done was really do it in a open house format where community members could come to a site along the Middle Cheshire Road corridor and respond to a series of informational and interactive boards that that we had prepared for them. So we didn't receive a huge turnout for the public workshop. We had approximately 12 attendees. But since we had recognized that there may be people who did not feel comfortable coming out during COVID, or maybe just didn't have the time to attend our public workshop, that we would host an online survey that really mirrored the questions that we asked in the open house. So we did have the public survey open from approximately, you know, right after the public workshop in August to mid September. And so we did garner up a lot more input based on that online community survey, and had over 60 participants respond to that survey. And it might be a little bit difficult to read, but this slide really just shows a couple of the interactive boards that we had utilized during the open house that really asked community members really the types of treatments that they would like to see along the corridor, or that they would feel most comfortable using if they were primarily a pedestrian, a bicyclist, or you know, a vehicle user. And we also asked them, you know, the types of improvements that they would like to see at specific intersections, what their perceptions on, you know, implementing additional pedestrian and bicycle amenities along the corridor would be, and, you know, how they would receive those types of improvements. Thanks, Ted. And really this chart just shows some of the key themes that we had received from that engagement. And, you know, I won't go through all of these one by one, but really some of the main concerns, and Kimberly mentioned this already, but a lot of the main traffic speed and safety for pedestrians and bicycle users if we were to promote more of that type of multimodal connectivity along the corridor. And really, you know, we address a lot of the concerns that we heard from community members by really providing a physical separation in our recommendations for vehicles compared to those pedestrian and and implementing or recommending the crosswalk striping, signage, amenities that really raise awareness for vehicle users related to pedestrian and bicycle users as well. And I will hand it over to Dave to talk about some of the traffic analysis that we have conducted.
All right, thanks a lot. Sorry about that. I had trouble getting my Zoom unmuted. But for those who haven't met me yet, my name is Dave Schwartz. I'm a traffic engineer, the resident traffic engineer for this project. I know that gets everybody all excited, traffic. So I'll try to get through this. So we did some analysis of the intersections along the roadway. I'll talk about 5 and 20 and Paris Street, two of the two big ones actually in this corridor. For specifically for West Street and Paris Street, one thing I know that was discussed was signal installation. So we did do a signal warrant analysis, it's called. We put in volumes, we looked at the AM and PM peak hours, and we did some counts actually I should say GTC did some counts for us back in August. And looking at the warrants at Weston Parish, we really were not all that close. So, you know, the traffic volumes might be less due to COVID-19 and less travel, but we really weren't all that close on the warrant analysis. So we did find the signal at Parish and West was not warranted at this, you know, at this time. You can move the slide ahead. We also did just a general level of service analysis. We found that, like I mentioned before, I'll go to West and Parish first. A signal is not warranted, and level of service there is actually pretty good. There's not a whole lot of traffic delays there. We are looking at some improvements there to make the to improve the ped crossings, but no need for any additional traffic control there to improve level of service. At Middle Cheshire and Route 5 and 20, again, the intersection is well under capacity, a level of service B actually, which is a very, very minimal delay. One thing we wanted to look at for this intersection to help improve the pedestrian crossings there was adding a 5-second lead phase. What that does is the signals for traffic remain red, and when actuated, the walk indication starts. It allows people to out into the street so that when the traffic light does turn green, people can see pedestrians already out there. It prevents a lot of the typical crashes that you would see with vehicles that are making turns. If you're making a left turn and see somebody already out in the street, it's a little bit easier to notice if they go first. So we did that analysis and found that once again, it doesn't add that much delay to the traffic. So that would be one of the things that we could do at the signal. And I believe that's it for my little section. Is that right? I'll hand it back off to Sam.
And maybe since we do have a small group, are there any questions on the traffic analysis work that was completed?
Not yet.
Okay. Great.
I'll stick around. I'll be here the whole meeting.
Okay, so I think, Lindsay, we're handing it over to you now.
Yeah. So I'll walk through the bicycle and pedestrian recommendations along the corridor end to end, and then we'll get into some of the other details. The majority of the recommended treatments are located along the east side of the roadway for the entire corridor of Middle Cheshire, with the exception of Wells Curtis to Foster Road. What we had recommended was a side path on the west side of the roadway that would transition to the east side on Foster Road, and we'll get into that in a little bit more. The side path would accommodate both pedestrians and cyclists, and would have a variety of buffers throughout the corridor that we'll talk in a little bit more detail. So again, just a visualization end to end of the corridor. So it would be a shared use path. You see the one small section that would have would be on the west side instead. Shared shoulder or a bike lane on Wells Curtis Road was recommended. So again, this is the recommended treatment for Wells Curtis Road. Widening for a 5-foot shoulder, maintaining the 10-foot travel lanes, which would keep speeds lower on that roadway. That would transition at the intersection of Middle Cheshire to a side path on the the west side of the roadway. Essentially maintaining the cross section more or less the way it is, but the existing shoulder on the west side would include a rumble strip, potentially flexible delineators as well, and that would create that buffer between pedestrians and cyclists on the west side. The transition would just be a simple crosswalk at the intersection of Foster and Middle Cheshire. That could be enhanced into various different crosswalk treatments, using an RFB, a raised crosswalk in this location probably wouldn't fit the character, but an RFB could be used to enhance this crosswalk and yield compliance. But really, it's just a simple crosswalk on the north side so that you're only crossing at one location to transition. This is a discussion item I wanted to bring up today, because we are on the east side of Middle Cheshire the rest of the way. Should we consider recommending the side path south of this location, south of Foster Road, on the west side and on the east side instead? The reason we had initially recommended the west side is because there are fewer conflicts and fewer grade issues. So the construction of widening the roadway to construct the shared use path would be a little bit more challenging, but would be more consistent to the corridor. There are a few more driveways, a few more mailboxes, and again, those grade issues. You're going to have a little bit of that on both sides of the roadway, but they're more common and more frequent on the west side. I don't believe that this crossing is significant enough to warrant that additional impact, but I wanted to hear from others and what you thought as to whether or not we should pursue that switch for consistency.
Anyone have any thoughts?
Quiet group today.
Yeah, I comment. I live out in that area, just north of Wells Curtis Road. The opposite side of the road, the west side of the road, You know, my neighbor across the road has about 20 acres there that's gonna be continually farmed. And just north of her house, it's all farmland also. So the bulk of the property on that side going up to Johnson Road is primarily farmland. So until you get just south of Johnson Road, there's several new houses that have been built. It just seems to me that on the west side, there's less intrusion on the people's property.
Exactly. Yeah, there
So-
is this,
Even with the crossing at the intersection of Foster and Middle Cheshire Road, it's, you know, I've lived out there for 35 years, and, you know, the amount of traffic at that point, other than early in the morning, people coming up to Middle Cheshire Road to get up towards the Rochester area, the metropolitan area. Other than that, the traffic is, you know, pretty light out that far out. You know, the bigger developments are more north of that, up toward the city of Canandaigua. So a crossing there, in my opinion, wouldn't be a dangerous situation.
great. Thank you for the feedback. I really appreciate it. And that's, you know, consistent with what we thought as well. So we'll plan on leaving the recommendation as is, with the shared use path on the west side. Any other thoughts?
Not in that area yet.
Okay. So continuing to move north from Foster Road to White Cliff Drive, this would be a shared use path 8 to 10 feet wide on the east side of the roadway. And again, that barrier type can be a number of different things, and it's easy to transition that through the corridor. That transition and change can happen as frequently really as needed. It's the consistency of the shared use path that's important from a bicycle and pedestrian expectation and user friendliness. Split rail fence can be used as an extra level of separation, a grass median, the existing gutters that are out there, a curb. So there's a number of separation types to consider that fit the character and the existing conditions. Continuing north, again, still a shared use path is the recommended alternative, 8 to 10 feet wide. This is where we start to run into some utility pole conflicts. So we imagine some variability between that 8 and 10 feet width to minimize the impacts or utility pole relocations. And then similar to the southern end, this would be a widening of the roadway using some of the existing excess pavement width to still create the 10-foot wide shared use path, but within the roadway space as opposed to separated by grass or the concrete gutter, but still continuing that shared use path along the east side. The 10-foot travel lanes, the narrower shoulders, that will also help to calm traffic and provide a more comfortable walking and bicycling environment through this area. And then between 5 and 20 to Bristol Street, still on the east side, but further removed from the roadway, recommending an 8-foot shared use path in that existing space. So that provides a consistent treatment for bicycles and pedestrians for the full length of the corridor.
Any thoughts or questions on that piece?
I think you guys have done a great job capturing what everybody, all the feedback you've gotten from, you know, the public and the committee over all of our meetings. It's nice to see it on paper, and it's exciting to see what we might get to try to do.
Great, thanks, Sarah.
So thank you.
Okay, so Ted's going to take it over from here and recap some of the intersection treatments that we had talked about our last meeting, and there's been some minor modifications, and then also talk a bit about some of the placemaking elements in a little more detail than we previously touched on. So with that, it's all yours, Ted.
Okay, thanks, Kimberly. All right, so as Kimberly mentioned, we're going to take a look at some of the, the recommendations that we've previously looked at that we've tweaked a little bit and kind of confirmed with some of the public feedback, some of the recommendations that we are proposing here. So starting at the southern end of the corridor, where Wells Curtis Road meets Westlake Road, we're really looking here to build upon previous studies that were done with this intersection to see how we can reduce the pavement width, narrow the intersection opening to make it less of a vast open space and help define the different uses, the striping and signage to really direct cars where to go and also to provide that opportunity for bicyclists to use the shoulder to work their way up to the Middle Cheshire Road corridor. So we would be looking to do this to make these recommendations while still being able to accommodate things like trucks with boat trailers and farm equipment that may need to have access at this intersection as well. At the White Cliff Drive intersection, in the public feedback that we received, pedestrian accommodations, having, making sure that the sidewalks connect to the crosswalks and creating those ADA accessible crossings and having the enhanced crosswalk markings were the priority and what was important. In these recommendations, we are still showing some of those placemaking opportunities and to incorporate wayfinding, site amenities like benches and things like that to help define the corridor, which we will talk about a little bit further on. And you can see in these images too, some of the opportunities for those barrier treatments that, that Lindsay was talking about and how we can incorporate those into the project to increase the pedestrian safety. At Route 5 and 20, again, the big concern here and priority was pedestrian safety. Obviously, there isn't a crosswalk here today, so that was that ranked pretty high as for incorporating that crosswalk and the pedestrian accommodations, the pedestrian actuated signals at this crosswalk. The amenities were less of a priority with the community, but the amenities will also help to enhance, hopefully help to enhance the safety of this crossing by including amenities like bollards and the stone piers and the wayfinding signage. It helps to signalize to the users of the corridor that they're coming up to a pretty significant intersection, that there's going to be a change in environment here that they really need to pay attention to. So we'll just help to increase that sense of safety. At the intersection of Paris Street, as Dave had noted, the data didn't warrant there to be a signalized intersection here. But what can we do to still improve the intersection for safety for users? Again, providing those ADA accessible curb ramps and the enhanced crosswalk markings were pretty high on the priority list for the community members that participated in the workshop and in the online survey. So incorporating that to really create that consistent, safe corridor was important. Now, before moving on to some of the placemaking nodes and opportunities, were there any feedback or comments from the intersection treatments? It is a very quiet group today.
Yes, I'd like to say something.
Sure.
In regards to the Middle Cheshire and your West Street. I've lived out there before, you know, the bypass was installed. And the people going south on West Street, they get ready to turn. There's only one lane there. You aren't proposing to put 2 lanes there like you have on the south side of 5 and 20? So people can turn and also either way or go straight?
Are you at the intersection of Paris Street or the intersection of 5 and 20?
What, 5 where, and 20. West Street and 5 and 20, going south.
For a turn like
Actually,
that,
guys, West Street is not West Street. That is Paris Street.
That's what I thought.
That is Middle Cheshire Road still. Then it starts at West Street at the city line.
No. Yeah, that's part of Middle Cheshire Road, actually.
Right.
From the intersection going north to Paris Street, that is officially part of Middle Cheshire Road.
okay,
You have West Street there.
okay.
I'd like to speak to a little bit of the history of that intersection. About 15 years ago, I was chairman of the planning board here in the town, and there's a housing development called the Villas. It's built just south of that intersection on the west side of the road. The area had to be rezoned, and the town board at that time used the incentive zoning process as a conduit to change the zoning to allow a denser build out. In exchange for that incentive, there were some amenities that were promised to the town by the developer. One of those amenities was to put a turning lane to turn east from Middle Cheshire Road as you're heading north, as you have depicted there. One of the other amenities was to have, on the opposite side of the intersection, a turning lane so people could turn to go north. This was really done to accommodate the change of shift times at the hospital, F.F. Thompson Hospital. Over the course of a few years, most of the amenities were installed. The one on the north side of the intersection, where you have the later West Street, the developer's engineering firm kept chopping it down a little bit more. And we wound up with just extending the width of that southbound lane a few feet, which really doesn't give people an opportunity to, create 2 lanes there. They petitioned DOT to allow that to occur, and DOT went along with it. But it's been a bit of a bone of contention here for those of us who were on the negotiating team, especially, that kind of got taken away from us. All the other amenities they promised, were eventually constructed or donated or whatever the case may be regarding a particular amenity. But that one does bear some looking at, I think. It's not like a full lane would have to be added, because there was some additional buildup of the road at that point. So whether, you go back to traffic counts and all those kind of things in order to substantiate something like that, I know, but it is something that has caused frustration for people in the area during shift change time coming from the hospital. So that's a little background on Gary's comment.
Terry, the DOT has emailed me recently that they're going to replace that signal there altogether with new signals. I asked what that means. They don't have an answer for me yet, but supposedly this summer they're going to replace those signals out there.
Another thing,
So maybe what you're asking.
Another thing that I was going to, and probably should have, when the individual was talking about the doing the traffic count, I contacted Kim, I don't know when, quite a while ago, to indicate that I was hoping that wasn't going to be the traffic count for, you know, to determine what the regular traffic was based on the COVID. And we all know that that slowed down traffic immensely since people were working from home. So to say that is underutilized, it may be, but it's not underutilized as much as it would have been if we didn't have this COVID for the amount of traffic. And like I said, I know that because I travel that way and we've lived out there for 40 some years, and I travel that way all the time. And that was my concern also about that extension of Middle Cheshire Road where you got West Street. If you go down there and try to come to Town Hall, as I have to do now and then, and try to turn left, especially around 5 o'clock or a little after when the hospital's letting out, you aren't going to make it during the green light for you a lot of times because there's just backed up traffic on the other side of the road on the north side of 5 and 20.
Dave, do you ask how you, you know, in our narrative part of the plan, we do discuss COVID. Do you want to recap that?
Were you asking me a question, Kim?
No, if I was seeing if Dave was still on and wanted to
okay.
weigh in on the COVID topic that you brought.
Sorry, you were cut out there for a second. So I apologize. I didn't hear which name you had called. Yeah, I mean the counts that we did, and you're talking about for 520 and West, or you're talking about for West Street and Parish for the signal warrant, just so I'm clear.
So
West Street and Parish, that's a 4-way stop sign.
Right. So that's what I make sure. So we're talking about the
5 and 20, Dave.
Okay.
Just in general, he was concerned that, you know, the August traffic counts obviously done during COVID are lower than, you know, August 2019, for example. So can you talk a little bit about how, even though the data was collected during COVID, why we still, you know, are assessing the traffic analysis the way that we are?
Yeah, I mean, it was collected during COVID. You know, we looked at, and there's not a whole lot of data at this intersection to compare to historically, but we did look at the volumes that were collected here and compared the daily traffic on the roads to the daily traffic that we got during these counts. It is slightly lower, obviously, now than it was historically, and I'll have to double check to see when that data was collected. So it's lower now. I mean, our findings were just based on the analysis. Level of service was still pretty, you know, still pretty good. It was at a B, and typically when you design a signal, you strive for a D or better. I can certainly appreciate that during some fluctuations, like you mentioned, when the hospital gets let out, that there might be some additional traffic along West Street during shift change. I can go back and look at the data to see if we noticed any of those sporadic, you know, 15-minute type peaks. But yeah, I mean, based on, you know, for adding an additional turn lane, just based on the counts that we got, and I mean, I could bump them up obviously and see at what point we would need to add a turn lane if you know, would like that kind of data, but just, you know, just in the numbers that we had, just didn't bear it out for, you know, analysis that we did. Hope that.
Yeah, and I think
It's not satisfying maybe, but I mean, it's just what, you know.
In talking to some local folks, you know, DOT and other agencies, you know, on similar topics for other transportation studies that we're doing, the thought was generally that, you know, by August, the traffic was back to close to 90% of pre-COVID traffic. So even taking into account that 10 to 20% increase of, you know, adjustment for COVID, I think still doesn't get us to the point where it's warranted. So that was ultimately where we landed on this.
I think earlier in the presentation, I think you were talking about adding a 5-second delay to the light. which would take it up to around 18 seconds, I guess, for somebody to cross 5 and 20. Is that sufficient time for somebody that might be, have a ADA situation where somebody is using a wheelchair or, some other assistance? I know that I've seen a number of accidents at that intersection, and I know Gary has also. And it took years and years before the state put in a traffic signal, to stop traffic. For years, it was just a blinking light, and until somebody was actually declared dead at that intersection, it was still just a flashing light. So crossing that highway, to continue this trail into the city of Canandaigua, crossing that highway is, I know it's not possible. I'd like a full minute, in order to get across there, because it is it's a dangerous intersection in my view. I've seen so many people blow through that light. I wait until I see the traffic stop both ways. But frequently, it's not just this intersection. We see that all over. I mean, people don't obey the traffic signals the way they used to, but that is, I think, a difficult intersection to cross.
And one thing I'll just point out there, the 5 seconds is not the time required to get across the whole intersection. What we did, and I should have pointed this out earlier, when we looked at the signal timings, we did calculate how long it would take for a pedestrian with a slower walking speed. I believe we used 3 seconds or 3 feet per second. We did evaluate how long it would take for them to cross the entire intersection, and the entire green span for the light was added into there. The purpose of the 5 second additional time, if you will, is at the beginning of a pedestrian phase. It allows the pedestrian to get from the curb out into the intersection. It's mostly for turning vehicles on West or Middle Cheshire Road, so that they can see the person in the crosswalk before they make their turn. We did evaluate how long it would take for them to cross, and we did the analysis. We included that time in the analysis. So that's there. Don't think the 5 seconds is just for the whole intersection. That's just to get them into the intersection so folks can see them a bit easier.
Yes, the total time that you were allowing wasn't it something like 17 seconds or?
I have to.
15.9 or.
It was something like that. It was something.
Yeah.
It's something around there. I mean, I don't know about a full minute might be pushing it a bit, but 15 to 20 seconds. That would be a time for the don't walk phase. The walk phase would add an additional couple seconds onto it as well.
Okay.
And this might be an opportunity that we can talk to DOT about some of the concerns that you just brought up and determine a good way to address them within the document.
Okay.
So Ted, I think you were going to go on to placemaking.
Yes. All right. So one of the other items that came throughout this process that was important was that, not only looking at the corridor, the Middle Cheshire Road corridor itself, but also those east-west connections that provide connection to the waterfront, connection to downtown Canandaigua, and also to the hospital. So we looked at a couple of areas where we can make these and create these unique placemaking nodes and connections. One of the areas that we looked at was actually the Canandaigua water treatment plant property. The plan that you're looking at here is a high level conceptual plan. This is just an initial thought of what an interpretive trail type facility could look like to help facilitate that connection between Middle Cheshire to the left and Westlake Road, Route 16 to the right. This plan would have to be further vetted and designed, but the thought was that there is the opportunity here to create a unique kind of eco-friendly trail with a variety of trail surfaces, boardwalk facilities that might go through ecologically interesting areas and wetlands, and create that opportunity to bring people to nature and to help to interpret and celebrate some of the natural assets in the area. The area shown on the left of the concept plan, creates a nice loop trail system that people could use. The initial thought is that this loop trail through the vegetated area could then connect to the access drive for the water treatment facility that would then create that connection to Westlake Road, Route 16. These images are just some inspirational images of what the type of trail facility could look like. Again, having some elevated boardwalks through areas that could be ecologically sensitive. This is a treatment that has been used throughout the area to help bring people to wetlands or other interesting environmental areas without creating a big impact on those natural assets. So this creates that opportunity for a unique trail system to provide interpretive opportunities in the corridor. Any initial thoughts on this interpretive trail concept?
We have had residents approach us and ask us if we could ever consider putting a trail there, especially since the water treatment facility already has the road. And I like the idea of considering it, but that wetland area, I think, is actually a conservation easement that's managed by the Finger Lakes Land Trust on town property. And I don't know what that easement, what kind of restrictions it has, if we would even be allowed to do that. But if we could, it's a neat idea. I'm sure people would agree that that would be fun. But of course, we got to look into it and see what would even be possible or plausible.
Okay, yeah, we can take a look into that to see if there's anything that would preclude this from being a possibility. But it's good to hear that there is interest for something in this area if it's possible. Okay. One of the other areas that we looked at was in the area of Thompson Hospital. This section of the corridor, as we have discussed in past meetings, is more of an urban kind of area. There's a lot of people that work in this area and use the sidewalk facility to take breaks, walks during their lunch and things like that. So what we're looking at here is creating, having that trail facility along West Street, but creating opportunity nodes for things like, if there's outdoor exercise equipment stations, activity stations and benches and things like that, along the corridor. So this is showing a series of areas or nodes where those potential uses could occur. Or those potential amenities could be placed. The brightly kind of colored ribbon that you're seeing along the trail here, what that represents is the possibility to include plantings or wildflower plantings, bringing nature into more of the urban area. It would create, it'd be visually appealing, but also create, habitat for birds, for pollinators, butterflies. Using things like wildflower plantings helps to cut down on, or help to reduce maintenance. These areas wouldn't need to be as mowed as often as traditional turf would need to be. So it would create a visually appealing ribbon that would then tie together all of these potential node areas. And these are just a couple of views. This is that intersection of Parish and West that shows, the corner the the northeast corner that has the Thompson Hospital sign, that start to illustrate what those nodes could look like. And here's another image of one of those nodes showing the inclusion of some of the pedestrian accommodations and potential for some of these trail fitness type amenities and facilities. Any initial thoughts on this concept before we move forward? Okay. One of the other amenities that we looked at was the existing switchback trail, which we had noted in past presentations, in which many of you are well aware of, is that it's kind of hidden. It's not easily accessible and visible from from Middle Cheshire, from that 5 and 20 Middle Cheshire intersection area, and also over on West Lake Road. What this concept plan is showing is really creating an entryway to that existing switchback trail. This is showing that new proposed path facility on 5 and 20, creating kind of an entryway to the switchback trail that allows us to play with the landform and create more of a curvilinear path to help deal with the change in grade that's in that area, to make the switchback trail more accessible to a wider variety of users. And here are just a couple graphics that show what this switchback trailhead could look like. Again, showing that easing down the slope, with more of a curvilinear path, and creating that entryway where there are those amenities, the wayfinding signage, interpretive signage, and benches and bike racks and things like that. This image is actually a good segue to our next topic, which is we're talking about some of those placemaking amenities and the placemaking palette that we're looking at. But before we move on to that, is there any initial feedback on this concept for the switchback trailhead?
I like that you guys have reduced that drop off.
It is pretty significant. Obviously this would need to be studied further, with getting exact survey and things like that. But looking for treatments to transverse that slope by using boulders and plantings and things to make it visually appealing, but also create that ADA accessible path down to the trail is really what we're trying to achieve here in this concept.
Yeah, and I think we have to mention that to really make it ADA accessible, the whole path would have to be improved, because right now it's pretty chunky gravel. But something like this would make it more welcoming for all users. I think it'd be a nice improvement. Yeah.
The trail itself, as the actual switchback. Yes, the material is a bit rough, so that would need to be enhanced as well for a surface that is ADA accessible and also can withstand some of the slope treatment, or some of the slope that's out there today. All right. So one of the other things that we started to take a look at was an amenities palette. Placemaking and corridor identity is another area that we were looking at as part of this study. Some of the things that we looked at for inspiration and to help tie these amenities to the context of the corridor, some of the things that we looked at were existing plantings and materials that are being used today. We have pictured here goldenrod, which is a perennial that is throughout the corridor. Goldenrod, the first thing people might think of is allergies, and it makes them sneeze, but goldenrod does have this really bright, vibrant yellow color that can be distinct, and that can be an inspiration to draw upon, as well as the use of fieldstone and timber, natural materials that are prevalent throughout the corridor and would really help ground the corridor and tie it into the surrounding environment. So looking at those materials, we start to come up with an amenities palette for signage and wayfinding, looking at identification monuments, that pedestrian directional signage, and the opportunity for kiosks and interpretive signage to be used at some of those important nodes or decision-making points along the corridor to help direct people to the hospital, to downtown, the waterfront, and the Switchback Trail. Keeping in theme with the wood and the color, looking at site furnishings that draw upon that as well. So using wood materials. These show a series of different type of seating amenities, using wood and also metal with that bright yellow color to help tie everything together. These next couple images are just, again, some of those perspective views that start to show how those placemaking amenities can be utilized along the corridor in some of these major nodes. And again, here at the Switchback Trail, which shows the kiosks and wayfinding signage and benches as those placemaking amenities. Now, in this study, these are the recommendations that we are making, but I wouldn't want you to think that also this is the be all end all for these site furnishings. I think the key takeaway here is that as these projects go further into design, you will really want to take into account the context of this area and making sure that plays into the site amenities, and that the site amenities are consistent throughout the corridor and help create that identity. So there could be tweaks in color, there could be tweaks in material. Those are things that can be further discussed and analyzed as these projects actually go into implementation in the future. Are there any thoughts on the kind of recommended materials palette and amenities before we move on to the next steps?
Does this mean that the town of Canandaigua would have to adapt goldenrod as our official flower, or?
I don't know if you'd have to adopt it as your official flower, but it's just one of those things out there that's common in the environment, but and can have a bad rap to it, but it does have beauty in itself, and they can provide that inspiration.
And we do have a lot of it. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess with that, I'll turn it over to Kimberly for the next steps.
Okay, so we are getting close to, if you can go to the next slide, Ted, close to the finish line over the course really of the next month based on these concepts, and as long as there's no strong objections to any of our recommendations, we will move forward with developing cost estimates for improvement, as well as an implementation strategy, which will address not only the costs, but also phasing interim steps that may be required in order to advance any of the projects, and then pull it all together into one compiled report. So our goal would then be to provide the draft report by late November, early December to the committee for review, have a subsequent committee meeting to review any comments, answer any questions you might have on the draft report, and then can move forward with another public meeting to present the recommendations and findings from the report before the end of the year. So those are kind of the key milestones that we still need to hit, and happy to answer any questions on remaining schedule that anyone might have.
Kimberly, are you thinking that, because just looking at the timeline, that would look to me like adoption would be in January?
Probably the formal adoption, yes. We'd like to have it wrapped up with any comments in December, but then that formal execution, the formal meeting would be January.
I think it's feasible. What, have you guys already talked about potential style of public meeting in December?
So I think it's as we've kind of been saying all along, is, we get towards maybe third week of November, kind of evaluate where we're at with regards to the pandemic. If need be, we can certainly host a meeting online, a virtual public meeting, and also, incorporate a video of that meeting onto the website for people to view at their own time and leisure and provide comments via the web. So I think at this point we need to kind of still play it by ear. We're certainly flexible if the opportunity presents itself and we have a large space and there's an appetite for doing something indoors and in person. We have been doing those, and we've actually been requiring RSVPs for in-person meetings to ensure we're staying below the state's threshold of 50 people within any given space. So there are some ways that we can do that, but again, it will be kind of dependent on any direction that the town wants to give or how the town really feels about whether in person or virtual.
Yeah.
Town board meeting in December is on the 21st, and Christmas week, and I know we already have a number of things scheduled for that meeting, a couple of public hearings already, and we're going to be doing we typically have an organizational meeting in early January. We're going to move some of the organizational detail back to the town board meeting on the 21st. So I just wonder if that's a good time to have, if it was ready for that meeting. I just wonder what attendance might be like, for just thinking out loud.
Barry, are you thinking like that would be the public hearing for it?
What was that?
Are you thinking that you would suggest in December?
Well,
I'm not sure we're going to be ready.
Yeah, the public meeting you referenced would be just a presentation to the public of here's where it stands at this point in time.
Yeah, I guess I just didn't think it was going to be at the town board meeting.
Well, to have another meeting during that period of time, holiday area, I don't think would work.
And we have some flexibility. The holidays can be tough from a scheduling perspective and meeting attendance perspective. So we can revisit that with you, Sarah, and maybe see what makes most sense from a scheduling perspective and touch base with Bob as well.
Yeah, I would think we'd have to take a good look at what's going on.
Sure.
Yeah, we have a town board meeting tonight, 5 o'clock. I could bring this topic up and see what the rest of the board members think about, trying to host a public meeting sometime in December. I would presume that this would be toward the latter half of December rather than the beginning, but we could ask that question.
And if it was determined that it could work if it was in the front end of the month, I think we have, by that point, we will have all of the material compiled and available to present. So we could certainly do that as well. Again, we can push it up, we can push it back into early in the new year. We can certainly be flexible to, really, we want to be able to maximize participation. So if we do think December is going to be a hard month to get community members to participate, we can look at some tweaking to that.
Okay.
Well, then again, maybe it wouldn't be that difficult because we're all supposed to stay home anyway. So,
Right, which is sometimes the benefit of a virtual meeting. People don't have to go anywhere. So, they're more apt to just be able to easily log on and listen to a presentation in that format.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think we should prepare for a virtual meeting, and I don't know if we're going to be able to do an in-person meeting at all, just because,
Yeah.
numbers are ticking up, and
Yep.
talking at town hall about doing some more virtual stuff now that it's flu season and COVID season. So my initial response is, I don't know if I want to plan an in-person meeting at all for December for this.
Sure.
But I can't speak for everybody, but that's my opinion. And I don't know, I agree with Terry, December's tough to get people's attention. Everybody gets really distracted, but I guess it would depend on what part of December. We might have more luck early rather than later. So I guess we do need to discuss it a little more and think about it, try and come up with the best way to do it. Because I do want to get people to participate, and it's hard anyway, but maybe we could, and we don't have to figure it out now, but maybe we can talk about another postcard or something like that to try and get the word out to get people to join a virtual meeting.
Yeah, unfortunately, usually we entice people with food and drinks and freebies, but we can't do that anymore. So
only virtually.
Yeah, bring your own. Okay, well, that sounds good. So we will loop back regarding, some of the scheduling of the actual events as we get into later November, December, and can figure out the best path forward. But, if anything, we'll send out the PowerPoint to the entire committee, so those that weren't able to log on can at least get a sense of what was presented from the visuals and the presentation. We'll send that out after the meeting. And then if you think of anything else or, any other comments pop up, feel free to send us an email and share any additional ideas or thoughts that you have, and we will make sure we take those into consideration.
Sounds good.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. We appreciate your time and your feedback, and we will look forward to reconnecting soon.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.